right?
Yeah.
God isn't anxious that that's happened to all of us.
Yeah.
Because he knows that he's the lion and that we've been cut from his rock.
Amen.
Right?
Yeah.
He knows where a bunch of lion comes.
Right.
And so he comes and brings something forth inside of us where we start to feel rest in the presence of the fear. Then what happens is we start to feel the peace that passes understanding. Right? Then we start to see that the thing isn't that bad at all.
Yeah.
So what if everybody thinks I suck? What does that mean about me? Right? Really, the things we're so afraid of are really very insignificant, actually. And they're not based in any type of truth.
Right.
And you begin to see that. You begin to... Now I think, well, what was the worst that was going to happen to me if everybody thought I sucked and left anyway?
Yeah.
What's the worst that's going to happen to me? What's the worst that's going to happen to you, Shannon, if you just speak up and let it out one day?
The chihuahua will run away.
Maybe even it's over the top.
That's right.
It just
That's
comes
the
out
Lord.
of you. But what's the worst that can happen?
Right.
See, that's what God wants to ask you.
Right.
Can it take
No,
your life?
all that was a part of it.
Yeah. The guy who ordained me used to say this funny thing. They can't eat you. And I used to think,
Huh? Yeah, right. That's good.
now listen, he would go all over the world and go into places where maybe they did eat people.
Yeah, right.
That's what I was thinking.
But it's like this thing that we're so afraid of what can happen to us, right? And it's like we're so afraid that it means something about us. What does it mean about me? And there are so many fears attached to those things. When we experience trauma, we make conclusions about ourselves and our lives. And then every time we encounter something that we think speaks to that conclusion, we feel the trauma all over again. Well, God comes to bring something forth in us where we see that we're crucified with Christ to that conclusion about our life. That whatever word we took on about ourselves in the midst of that trauma, God comes and shows us we're dead to that word.
Right.
Meaning that word was never true. Look at the word that the world came against Jesus with when he hung on the cross. Do you think that was trauma? Now, what was the world trying to tell him about his life in that place? What was it trying to tell him about who he was and who God was? What was it trying to tell him about his value? Or even if he was successful as the Messiah, where are his disciples? Imagine all of the conclusions that were trying to come into his heart. But he gave up the ghost. He rejected every one of those words that were coming against him in the midst of that trauma. And he found life by the word that God spoke over him. You are my beloved Son,
Amen.
in whom I am well pleased. Now, the spirit of that was going on in Jesus was poured out. And it dwells in us. We have the Spirit of the Son now. That Spirit is dwelling in us. It is now reacting to the trauma we've encountered in this world. And what it's doing is it's causing us to give up the ghost or to see that we're dead to that word. See that that word about our life isn't true. See that all the conclusions we made about ourselves in the midst of the trauma isn't true. And then sets us free.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Absolutely.